And again, the only thing we sort of arrive midway, right? Responsibilities we sort of start to slowly take on, and before we know it, we're in the middle of caregiving before we realize we've done. So there's a couple of ways that you can prepare, even if it's already happening. Okay? And a lot of that is around finding the right support to fill in the blanks for you and helping you take better care of yourself. It's very difficult to think about putting oneself first when you're caregiving, but taking care of yourself in the long run is going to lead to better experiences for everybody all the way around. I'll do a little pop quiz, true or false. Someone who helps a person living with dementia with everyday tasks like grocery shopping or managing doctor's appointments can be considered a caregiver. True, right? Yes, absolutely. A lot of the time, it's hard for us to wrap our heads around the idea of being a caregiver if we're not doing medical care or physical care, right? But things like those instrumental activities, like paying bills, like going to the grocery store, picking up prescriptions, arranging doctor's appointments, all of that is necessary care, right? And so it's one thing that I've noticed, and actually I noticed even in myself as I was doing more help for my parents, right, as they've aged, is that there's a reluctance to identify as a caregiver. And if you don't put up your hand and say, yes, hi, I'm caregiving for my family, you're not going to be able to access those resources that exist for caregivers, right? No one's coming running out and saying, hey, are you caregiving? You sort of have to put yourself forward as that. And part of that is recognizing in yourself these things that you're already doing, right? So if you're driving someone to the doctor, or maybe it's not even to the doctor, maybe you're driving someone to the senior center so they can play bingo with their friends. That's already caregiving. Taking care of the finances, if you're the one that's paying the bills. If you are dropping off dinner every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? Leaving those Tupperwares in the fridge. All of that is caregiving. All of that up to and including things like helping someone in the shower, helping them to get dressed, right? These very hands-on things that we typically think of as being caregiving. This slide is actually a little bit outdated now. So this says there's more than 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's disease. There's actually almost 7 million Americans living with Alzheimer's disease right now, and nearly 12 million people providing unpaid care. So unpaid care just means the care that we get in the community from our family, our friends, our neighbors, right? And if we paid for that care, it would be at a value of billions of dollars, over $3 billion with a B dollars, right? It would be for that. We don't. About 80% of people with dementia are getting their care in the community. They're getting unpaid care. So again, I think we have this idea of caregiving as being something that happens somewhere away, right? People go someplace to get taken care of. But in reality, most folks are getting that care from their community, unpaid. And a lot of them are also paying, right, for additional care because there comes a point where you want. Family members can have really different caregiving roles. Not everyone is going to be the one that can handle the finances. Not everyone's going to be the one that has the schedule flexibility to drive someone around. So the way that you help might even be from far away, right? 64% of people say caregiving is stressful. 92% say it's rewarding. I share that because I think many of us who are caregiving feel both of those things at the same time, right? And sometimes one can tip a little bit harder than the other. But there is there's an impact, right, on the relationship when we're caregiving. And sometimes that impact is stressful and difficult. And a lot of the time that relationship change is also really rewarding and sustaining of the relationship and the effort that both sides are putting to it. Let's talk a little bit about the sorts of changes you might experience, regardless of the role you have in this person's life. So you might be taking care of a parent, you might be taking care of a spouse, you might be taking care of a neighbor, right? Or someone with whom you have like less of an intimate relationship. When my grandmother was still living in her home, she had a neighbor who would show up and go for a walk with her every day, right? That person really was part of the caregiving team, even though he wasn't related to us. He was just a really friendly guy. He used to bring over the newspaper when he was done reading it so she could read it. She gave up her newspaper, right? That's part of her team. And that's someone whose relationship with her did change as her dementia progressed. But the first thing is taking on new roles, right? And again, this is one of those parts where it may happen slowly. You may slowly transition into taking over some responsibilities. It might be something like you are noticing that the housekeeping isn't getting done, so you start tidying up every time you come over. It might be noticing that bills aren't getting paid, and bills need to be put on auto pay, or you need to take over, right? It might be noticing other things that are more serious responsibilities, like noticing, hey, this person can't responsibly take their medicine at the right time and the right dosage anymore, and I really need to do something about that, right? When we take on these new roles, that can put a lot of stress on the relationship, and a lot of stress on us. And I think some of this depends on the existing roles and what you're taking over, right? So it's very common, for example, in our family support groups, that there is a spouse taking care of another spouse that has dementia. And they say in the support group, I was never the one that paid the bill. I don't have the logins for any of our accounts. I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. She always paid the bills. And so you're taking on that new role, and that's stressful because of the effort, but also because you don't know how to find the things that you need to do the job, right? This can be a different sort of shift, taking on new roles when you're caring for a parent, right? So my grandmother did not like her children telling her what she should do with her time, her effort, or her location, right? And so when you're caring for a parent, a lot of the taking on of the new role is about realizing you're taking over the things that perhaps they used to do for you, right? And they might feel like you are parenting them in a way that can cause a lot of tension in the relationship. So taking on these new roles can be simple, but have a lot of emotional impact. It's really helpful if you can to plan ahead, to be really upfront about the fact that changes are coming, that changes will be taking place. So let's talk about how we're going to do those things together. A lot of the time when we're taking care of someone that has a cognitive impairment, because the disease is progressive in nature, right? They will be able to contribute more and provide more guidance at the beginning than they will as things progress. So sitting down together and including the person living with dementia in the conversation, if you can, early on, is really helpful. Talking about what you would like to do and what they would like you to do. Talking about things like, hey, how are you paying your bills right now? Identifying where those things are. Where are your bank accounts, right? Preparing to take on those roles as they it might even be as simple as talking to them about like, hey, we're living in this house that has stairs and the bedroom is upstairs and the laundry is downstairs. If you can't do the stairs so well, what do we want to do, right? Do we want to talk about moving? Do we want to talk about putting a bed in the living room? Do we want to talk about sending out your laundry, right? What are the things that we want to do in advance of having actual takeover doing those things? I mentioned the bed in the living room because for my grandmother, that was the thing. We tried to get her to move downstairs. She's like, I'm not sleeping in the living room. That's not what we need. And she did. We got her one of those little jimmies that takes you up and down the stairs in a chair. That's what we did for grandma. Relationship changes. So we've talked about role changes and relationship changes happen in between you as the caregiver and your loved one as the care receiver. But there's also relationship changes that happen for you out in the whole wide world. Your other relationships are going to be affected by caregiving. You may find that you have less time for things that you used to do right now. Okay? If you're caring for someone, and like perhaps you care for them every Saturday, perhaps you care for them every Wednesday after work, right? And these things are impeding on time you would have to spend with other people. You might find that some of your family and some of your friends pull away, and they're uncomfortable, right? Or they're scared. I have had interactions with people who are caregiving who are really young. You know, I used to facilitate a support group specifically for caregivers under 40. We still have that group, but I'm no longer facilitating it. And I was talking to caregivers in their early 20s, right? 22, 23, 24-year-old people caring for their parents. Their friends didn't really understand that. And their friends didn't understand why these people, mostly girls, mostly daughters, couldn't go out of town or couldn't go out on Friday night because they were taking care of their parents, right? And so that does have an effect on the relationship. Some people will pull away. Some people will step forward though. Some of your people will step forward for you and ask what they can do. And it might surprise you which people land in which category. We don't always know, right, until the moment is upon us, which people will step forward and which people will step back. But I will say that a lot of the time when people pull away, it's because of one of two things. Either they don't want to do the wrong thing, so they freeze and do nothing, or because they are scared of what's going on and they're uncomfortable being around that kind of change, right? So what you can do, I'm going to put a little bit of responsibility back on you, not all of it, but just a little bit of responsibility back on you to step into your relationships and ask for support. Okay. Reach out, let people know, hey, I know I'm really busy and I haven't been around a lot, but I want you to know I still value our relationship, right? You can maybe schedule a text or schedule a card to go out to people and just let them know, like, hey, I'm here. And I value you and I can use your support. You might consider telling people what they can do for you when they ask. Has anyone here ever been in the situation where your friend or your family member was going through a really hard time and you said, just let me know if there's anything I can do? I know I've said that a lot. Let me know, I just said it to my friend just had a baby. And I said, let me know if there's anything I can do. Sure, yeah, baby. We mean it, right? When I tell my friends, let me know if there's anything to do, I mean it. But I also kind of mean like, I don't know what to offer. Please tell me what I can do for you. I want to help you. When my friends say to me, is there anything I can do? A lot of the time I feel like, well, I don't know, right? Like, I guess you could help me, but I don't really know what to ask for. I don't know what's too much. It can often feel like it's more work to explain to someone how to help you than it is to just do it yourself, right? So I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about what would help. What could someone do for you? An exercise we sometimes do in support groups is have people create themselves like a care menu. Like, what could someone do for me that would give me 10 minutes? What would I do with 20 minutes? What would I do with a half a day? What would I do with a whole day where I wasn't caregiving, right? Because if you spend the time thinking about it now, I'm thinking like, you know what, the thing that I really can't do anymore is I cannot do the grocery shopping anymore. I can't deal with it. I cannot be in Safeway. I can't do it. And so when the friend says, what can I do for you? You could say, here's my list. Could you go to the grocery store? Or you could say, I made a pickup order at the grocery store. Could you go pick it up and bring it to my house and put the groceries away? Right? So these very mundane things help us, but they also help the friend feel like they're helping.
My mother used to make a list, always had a list, so if somebody asked, she had something. And a couple of my brothers at some point noticed that sometimes the list, it was such a silly thing. But my mom said, if you don't have something for people to do, they'll stop asking.
Exactly. It's sort of like if you always say no to the party invitation, they eventually stop inviting you, right? It's kind of the same thing. So yes, I mean, I know, again, it is putting a little bit of responsibility back on you, but it should have a really good return on that investment, right? Because again, think of yourself. You have wanted to help when you offered help. And if someone had given you a task, you would have done it. So it's a helpful exercise. Another thing that can be really helpful, especially with family and with the person with dementia's friends, okay, is to educate them a little bit, give them some tips. You know, something that tends to happen is that as we get older, our circle gets smaller, right? We lose people for many different reasons, and our circle gets a little bit smaller. And then when someone has Alzheimer's disease, it can be hard for those friends to keep up and understand how to interact with them. They might not remember the stories this person is trying to reminisce about. They might not recognize the person. They might act in ways that are different or might be a little bit scared or confrontational, right? And so by providing that little bit of education for friends or from family that's visiting, family that's been a little bit more distant, It can make the visit go better. It can give you a little bit of a respite during that visit, but it also is just better for all of the relationships. So, for example, if there's a holiday coming up and family's gonna be visiting, it can be helpful to just say, hey, this is what's going on with mom. These are the things that would be great to talk to her about. Give them some conversation tips. Give them some, conversational landmines to know. Okay? Remind people the things that you are doing automatically because you've been caring. It can be really helpful and it can make it less stressful on you. And then another change that can happen in relationships is this very basic change in emotional and or physical. Okay. And this includes like romantic relationships, this includes familial relationships, kind of goes across the board. As the disease progresses, the person is still there, right? Their personhood remains, but the way they express it is going to change. I was talking to a woman who was caring for her longtime partner. And one of the things that she said to me is that they've been together 20 years or so, and their relationship had always had a lot of banter. They were always teasing each other. They would kind of, tease each other back and forth, make a lot of jokes. And he was very quick-witted. So he would make like puns, sort of word jokes. He had a form of Alzheimer's disease that affected his vocabulary. And that was changing. And so for her, there was also, physical changes, but one of the big changes was that the thing that sort of sustained their emotional connection was changing. She would make a joke and he wouldn't laugh. Or she would try to banter with him and it would hurt his feelings. He would get mad instead of interacting with her, instead of teasing her. Right? And that was causing distance. That was harmful. And so one of the things that we worked on with her was finding different ways to connect. Physical intimacy can change. If you're caring for someone that you have a physical relationship with, a sexual relationship, that can change in a couple of ways. Some people, as their dementia progresses, lose interest in sex. Some people become hypersexual, become very, very interested in it. And the partner might not be interested anymore, right? Because this person acting differently than the person that you've been in a relationship with. In certain circumstances, there might be like medical interventions that you want to do around that. It might not be a bad idea to talk to a doctor about that. But in general, a lot of dealing with that is about finding new ways to be intimate. Focusing on non-sexual physical interaction. When I was working in assisted living, I spent most of my time holding hands with somebody. So always holding hands with somebody. Because it was a very easy way for people to feel grounded and connected, right? And feel like they were in a safe place. Spent a lot of time walking with people kind of like with their arm in my elbow, right? So physical contact, but non-sexual and not easy to be confused for me. Okay. You also might look at doing some other types of activities with the person. So the examples here are going for a walk or listening to music. But one that I think is really good is things like cooking together, even if they can't actively cook, right? Letting them help with the preparation, letting them help combine things. Working on something physical together. So like working in the garden, doing an organizing project, things that allow them to have input and are sort of tactile and interactive in nature. And you can talk about memories together. I would suggest thinking about the way you talk about memories. So thinking about the way you structure that. And this is something I did a lot with my grandma, because she, she helped raise me. She lived only a couple of miles away in my whole childhood. We did lots of things together, but she didn't always remember them. So instead of saying, do you remember when? I would say, I remember a time when, right? And I would share the story with her. If I said, do you remember, Grandma, the time that you made us a playhouse in the backyard and didn't have any windows, so you made us paint pictures to hang up on the playhouse? She really did that. She sewed it. She sewed a playhouse out of old sheets and PVC pipe. She doesn't remember that. And so I said, Grandma, I want to tell you a story. I remember a time, right? It was summer and my parents were working and all four of us grandkids came over and we made this really big playhouse together and then we painted these pictures together. And I would tell her about it in that way. And when I gave her the information, she could say, oh, yes, I remember that. I'd say that was so much fun. Okay, we did a lot of fun things. Whether she remembered or not, who knows, doesn't matter. She felt the connection, right? So reminiscing in that way is really helpful. And that is also a good tip to give friends and family who are visiting, is to say like, hey, here's a way to package this, right? Here. So we're gonna hear a little bit from a caregiver now. This woman cared for her husband and for her dad. And just like I said, it should be loud enough. If you can't hear her, let me know and I'll help her out.
When I think about caregiving for my dad, who's been living with Alzheimer's disease for 13 years, my expectation is not that my dad is going to remember my birthday or know how old I am. But I'm pretty confident that if I show up at his place in his memory care assisted living with some cake, light a candle and tell him, Dad, today is my birthday, he's gonna smile, give me a hug, and want to enjoy some cake with me. And so that gives me a glimpse into that love and that connection that's still there between us as father and daughter. I've had to realign my expectations, but that has allowed me to be more present and available for these happy and connected moments between us.
Kind of the same idea, right? Instead of focusing on what's actually happening right now, you're trying to build good interactions. So I said I'm going to talk about person-centered care. Have folks heard this term before? Person-centered care? Yeah, looks like about half. It literally just means putting the person at the center of what you're doing. That's it. Easy. That's what it says on the tin, right? It involves using what you know about the person, what they like, and I would say in particular what they don't like, and their abilities, right? The things that they can still do to organize the way that you care for them, to organize the way you interact with them. This is really, really helpful for the person with dementia, because it helps them feel like there's a trust, like they're in a safe place. It helps them feel understood. A lot of the time, folks with dementia are feeling at their baseline just a little bit insecure, right? Because our memory is not something we can rely on really well, or we might be disoriented, not quite sure that we're in the right place. And so if someone who's helping you knows that you're in the right place, knows what you like, and understands what you usually need, that's very grounding and very helpful. We find that there's fewer dementia-related behaviors when approaches are person-centered. When you approach someone knowing about what they like and what they don't like, they're less bored, for one thing. My grandma, when I would go and like visit her, she was living in a small board and care community at the very end of her life. When I would go visit her, I'd say, Grandma, how are you? And she'd say, I'm bored to tears. Every time, bored to tears. Because she didn't know how to get started doing something to entertain herself, right? So she was just kind of hanging out. So when someone showed up who knew her, who could say, well, let's do this puzzle. Let's do the jungle. She loved the jungle. There's less boring, right? People might feel helpless because they lack that starter button. One of the things that changes for folks with dementia is initiating new activities gets really hard. That's because of changes that are happening right here in the frontal lobe, right with our executive function. So we lose the ability to get going, which can leave us feeling sort of like helpless and useless in a lot of ways. So a person-centered approach helps give the person the boost they need to do the thing. And in general, it just sort of contributes to a better sense of well-being. I think all of us can relate to that, right? We feel better when we feel understood. When you're with someone that gets you, don't you just feel better, right? You feel seen. For caregivers, the big thing that this will do is give you confidence. You will feel more competent because you will know what to do because you know this person, right? You don't necessarily need to know a bunch of theoretical information about dementia. You don't need a ton of like neuroscience knowledge to know this person and what works for them, right? And if we know that, then we can feel more confident moving forward. And it can really help with those relationship changes, right? Those relationship stressors that we talked about. If you know what the person likes and what makes them feel good, and you can bring those things forward. and you know what the person doesn't like, and that makes them irritated or angry, and you can make some of those things go away, that's gonna make the relationship better, right? You're gonna be able to make their life better. And that's gonna lead to a better quality of life for both of you. So here's a little 5-step rubric that you can use to approach this, okay? Again, we're talking about being person-centered, so all of the actual things that you do are gonna depend on, number one, use your knowledge of a person. But you can do all these things with this person, maybe not all day, every day, but most times, most of the days, okay? So use your knowledge of the person, connect with them in the moment, like the right now. Help them take part in meaningful activities. And meaningful is a moving target. It's what's meaningful to them, right? Not necessarily what would have been meaningful to them in the past or what would be meaningful to you. Focus on the relationship with the person, and then finally create a supportive environment. So you might know them better than anyone. Maybe this is your parent, your spouse, your sibling, your best friend. You might know this person better than anyone, but you're not inside the ring with them every day. So perhaps there's still things that you need to learn about them to provide the most and the best possible care you can. You want to be thinking about their values, what's important to them. Think about what they're interested in. My grandmother was a bookkeeper. She was a bookkeeper for a very, very long time. She also seamstress, so ballet costumes for my mom's ballet company forever. Made clothes for all of us when we were growing up. So she was very focused on having things to do. She never wasn't busy her whole life until probably the last 5 years, right? Lived to be 97, was busy all the time until she was 92. It was important to her to feel like she was doing things. Sitting around was not what she wanted to be doing. Think about people's abilities and how those abilities might have changed. So if someone was a big athlete and they used to play tennis 3 times a week, and that's changing. The ability is changing, right, to be that level of active. But the interest in being active, the value of wanting to be a physical person, right, is not gone. So how are we going to accommodate those changes? Think about likes and dislikes. And that can be really, really simple stuff, like they don't like peanut butter. And it can be really, really complicated stuff, like they don't like their Aunt Mary, and this caregiver that we've hired looks just like Aunt Mary, right? It can be a lot of things. Keep in mind that hobbies and interests can change. Things that they weren't interested in, they might be more interested in now. I used to take care of a gentleman who was an engineer, mechanical engineer, really smart, really kind of, in his head, numbersy guy. Never picked a paintbrush up in his life until after he had Alzheimer's disease. When he developed Alzheimer's and he was no longer working, he started painting watercolors. He was great at it. He would go with the watercolors. He used to make hand painted cards for the family for their birthdays and for Christmas and things like that. He probably never would have ever tried that on his own, but as his abilities were changing, someone, I think his wife, was like, why don't we try this? Why don't we try some art? Right? And it opened up a door. If you don't know the person well, if this is someone that you're caring for that you haven't known a long time, there might be other people that you can talk to about. And that was a big part of my work when I was doing caregiving professionally, right? I didn't know any of these people when they arrived, but I had to get to know them. Step 2 is connect in the moment. And the reason we talk about in the moment is because for folks with dementia, that's where they're living, right? Sometimes they might be thinking back to a previous time. They really struggle with thinking ahead, right? They're really in the moment. The short-term memory is usually pretty affected, and the ability to make plans is also affected. So that ability to sort of put steps in order, put plans in place and move forward, all of that is kind of happening up here in the frontal lobe, which is being affected. So focusing on like what's happening right now this second is going to be a much better way to connect. Try to see the world from their point of view. Accept the reality that they have given you. That can be really hard when they're telling you something that's not true. And sometimes it's sort of like funny, like when my grandma called and he was yelling at my mom because the whole family was in Las Vegas and why weren't my mom and I there with them? They were not in Las Vegas. Grandma was at her care home in San Jose. She was, your uncle is on the slot machine and your sister just won $200 playing blackjack, where are you? My mom just said, I'm sorry, I'm missing it, I hope I can come with you next time. And that's sort of like silly and fun. But sometimes the reality is they think someone stole something from them, they think something's missing, they think they need to go home, right, and they are home. Accepting that reality versus trying to persuade them of something else is gonna be a lot more productive and a lot more calm in the long run. So focusing on the underlying emotion versus the truth, focusing on the feeling and not necessarily the fact. So Grandma called and said, like, why aren't you here in Las Vegas? What she meant was, I wish you were here, right? She thought of us, she meant us. So focusing on that versus focusing on nobody is in Las Vegas. Okay. If a topic is upsetting the person, make a little switch.
I was gonna say, what if the person has in their mind that this is true, what they're saying is true, and you know that it's not? How do you still keep them calm versus, no, this isn't, no, nobody stole anything, or no, we're not in Las Vegas, how do you keep them calm?
Yeah, well, I would say don't correct, don't say no. Overall, if you can avoid saying no ever, I would try to not say no. I try to kind of eliminate that word as much as you can. More of like a yes, but, or an okay. Right, maybe not a yes, but maybe an okay. So if something is missing, the purse is missing, whatever, and we do have a whole class all about managing behaviors, and one of the behaviors is accusation, suspicion, paranoia. So that class goes into this in more detail, but someone says to me, someone stole my purse, it's gone. I wouldn't say, no, I don't think that's true, I have your purse like at my house. I would say, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna figure it out. I'll take care of it. And then I would give them something else to do in the meanwhile while I took care of it. If someone thinks that they need to go home, rather than saying you are home, I would say something like, I understand that you feel like it's time to go home, but we're in the right place right now. Right? So rather than correcting, sort of like acknowledging the feeling and then trying to turn the conversation away from that topic. Again, we have a full class that goes into it in more detail, but that's, in my experience, the best thing to do. No can be a really hard thing for any of us to hear. Like who here likes being wrong, right? Who likes being told they're wrong? And to be told you're wrong about something really fundamental, like where you are, is scary and hurtful, right? So avoiding that as much as possible and trying to just say, like, I know we're not in Las Vegas, I know we're at your house, but how do I convey the idea that, like, regardless of where we are, everything's cool because we're together and we're gonna take care of this, right? Being on the same team is what I try to convey. And switching topics can actually be really, really helpful. Because of their short-term memory changes, a lot of people can be sort of taken to a different conversation and will pick up that conversation. The underlying emotion isn't gonna go away, right? And so that's why turning to something that's more positive, something that makes them feel good, can be really helpful to try and change the emotional state as well. And part of that is this one, number 3, help make activities meaningful, right? Keeping a person busy and keeping them feeling like they're doing something that matters to them is really important. Giving the person choices. So, when we talk about choices in dementia, choices can be really overwhelming and choices very empowering, right? Both things are happening at the same time. So for example, if you go out to eat, you go to a restaurant, you don't want to take them to some place like the Cheesecake Factory and hand them like a 40-page menu and say, okay, what do you want? Right, I don't even want that, that's overwhelming. But it's helpful to offer like a 1 or 2, right? A or B decision. Do you want this or that? I've got this pink sweater or I've got this blue sweatshirt. Which one do you want to wear? Right, that sort of choice. You can also give yes, no choice. Do you want this or not? Okay. And you can also give what I think of as sort of the illusion of choice, which is to say, I thought we might go for a walk. Doesn't that sound great? Okay. I thought I might pick up a pizza. They don't really have to agree or disagree, the choice is sort of already built into what you're telling them, but it allows them to be part of the decision making in sort of a passive way. Right? Consider that even as the person's condition progresses, and they might not be able to participate in things in the same way, they can still feel joy and comfort. They can still find meaning in activity. So, for example, you know, I had a client long ago, resident in assisted living, who did the piano. She'd been a concert pianist. She'd been a highly accomplished pianist. And she really only could play sort of this one song anymore. It was sort of like a repetitive, very loud song. She couldn't read music anymore. We still put the music book up on the piano for her because she wanted it. And she would just play the same song every single day. That was really important for her. She didn't really speak very much anymore. She grew up speaking English and Spanish, and she converted to just speaking Spanish. But she could understand her sit for the piano play. And so that's what we let her do every afternoon. You can kind of go with the flow. I know we need structure, right? We need structure, but we need to be flexible within that structure. We don't need to plan every single activity ahead of time. And what I would say kind of as a corollary to that is you don't want to be so focused on the fact that this was the activity you were supposed to be doing that you lose sight of the relationship and the interaction you're having with that person in the moment. So you don't need to be so focused on the fact that it's Tuesday and on Tuesday they were going to take a shower that you are getting frustrated and angry because they don't want to take a shower, right? Or you're supposed to be going to the doctor's office and they're not moving quickly enough to get to the doctor's office, right? That's where a lot of the frustration tends to come from caregivers, is this feeling that we are stuck and we're up against a deadline and we gotta do it, right? A lot of the time we don't have to. A lot of the time, if they don't take a shower on Tuesday afternoon, it's actually gonna be okay, right? It's actually gonna be all right. There's gonna be other things that we can do and we can be approached later. So going with the flow within the structure is very helpful. Focusing on a supportive relationship, so putting that person before the task, right? Focusing on like, okay, yes, there's certain things that we need to get done. Probably the person needs to eat something today. Probably the person needs to go to the bathroom today at some point, right? There's some basic hygiene stuff that probably has to happen. How flexible can we be within that? If they didn't get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, so they didn't eat breakfast at 8 o'clock, and you're thinking in your head, oh my gosh, and then now like they're not gonna eat lunch until 3 o'clock, and then they're not gonna eat dinner until 10 p.m. and you're sort of getting ahead of yourself in that way. I would say take a deep breath, slow down, and sort of focus on what's actually going on in the moment and the relationship with that person. So okay, they didn't wake up and eat breakfast at 8 o'clock. Maybe we just make like a really big breakfast at 11 and we kind of scrap the idea of lunch. It'll be all right, right? Thinking about things in that way. Thinking about doing activities with the person versus for the person. So again, this is something that tends to come up a lot with those sort of hygiene activities. So someone might not feel good about you saying, I need to give you a shower, or I need to change your clothes, right? When you're focusing on a supportive relationship, you might think about how you presented that. You might say, hey, let's get ready to go. So-and-so is coming over, can we get freshened up, right? Sort of focusing on that in the moment. And doing things with them rather than for them, meaning like if you set the things up, can they do the tasks? If you set the clothes up, can they get dressed? Or perhaps not. Perhaps you have to hand them each item and be there while they put it on. It's okay, right? But rather than taking over just because it's more efficient, allowing them to participate, making it caring together versus just caring for. We'll hear from Dr. Fazio. He's going to talk about that a little bit.
Caregiving can be difficult, but each day presents us with opportunities and challenges. So it's really important to celebrate those small wins. Like providing just the right amount of support to have somebody successfully get dressed by themselves, or brush their teeth, or even set the table for dinner. Everything that happens throughout the day can be considered an activity. Little things like setting the table, or going for a walk and talking about family, or even spontaneously dancing to some music, are all things that happen throughout the day and time well spent.
Every place I've ever worked, setting the table was part of the activities for the day. Every day program, every assisted living I've ever worked, doing basic household chores was always an activity. Folding laundry. Step 5 is to create a supportive environment, and that means an environment that is helpful for the person with dementia to be able to accomplish the things that they need to do. But it also means an environment where you're able to be as calm and as patient and as healthy as you can be, right? It's supportive ideally for as many people as possible. This is another one where in a perfect world, you've had some conversations about this while the person is able to have some of those conversations, right? So talk to the person about what an environment looks like and feels like to them. Some people would rather never leave their home, and they would accept having someone come into their home to help them if it meant they got to stay in their house. Right? Some people might have moved a lot in their life, or maybe they've already downsized and moved to somewhere that they're like not super attached to. And they would rather be in community with other people. Maybe they want to be in an assisted living environment, or like an older adult, sort of 55 plus like community, right? Maybe that's what they want. Think about that. Think about changes in the home that can increase safety, right? So like I said, we've got my grandpa little Jimmy. Putting bars up, right, in showers. There's people that will come out to your home and do a safety assessment and give you some tips on what to do to make your home as safe as possible for as long as possible. Think about activities they like and suggest those to them. Again, they will struggle to initiate activities. So just having a puzzle sitting on the table, or having a card game sitting on the table is probably not going to be enough. Inviting the person to do an activity will be a little bit better. They're unlikely to just sort of pass by something and engage with it. Keep favorite items where the person can easily see them. Another thing I think about in supportive environments is keeping snacks where they can see them. If you're caring for someone who is maybe losing weight, or they're not focusing really well at mealtime, it's not a bad idea to have a little something sitting around that they can get to. Oftentimes things that are out of sight are out of mind, right? So they're not going to open a cabinet and look for something. So having where they can get, having a glass of water where they can just pick it up and drink some water, right? Putting it in front of them so that it's right there. Creating a calm and soothing atmosphere. So thinking about things like lighting. What's the lighting like in the room? Is it really bright? Are there lots of shadows that could be kind of confusing or scary? Is the TV always on in the background, and what is on that TV, right? So when I would go see my grandmother, the TV was always on. I think the TV had been on all the time in my grandma's house, like my whole life. She always had something, usually like Hallmark type movies, right, on the background, where for a long time it was soap operas on the background. Stuff happens on TV that is scary and loud, right? And we don't always know what's going to happen. So if someone has like the news on, they've got like NBC News running in the background, or Fox News, or CNN, and it's just people arguing with each other on TV, that's going to affect the mood of the person, right? So think about things like that. Think about temperature. Think about the physical position that they're sitting. If they're kind of like slumped down in a chair, is that going to give them, a neck ache, and that's going to affect them? So really thinking about like the physical plant. Okay. And then the other piece of the supportive environment is you. You are the support. You're what's upholding the supportive environment. So taking care of yourself, asking for a break, thinking about what a break means to you, and what you would do with that break, right? Is part of that supportive environment. And because of that, we're going to talk about building a support team. So a support team can be formal, it can be informal. But one thing that I want to make clear is that nobody is creating your team and handing it to you, right? So when you get a diagnosis like Alzheimer's disease, they will say like, start building your support team. And that's what they're going to say. They're not going to say, here's the list of people that are on your team. You kind of have to build it. gotta build the plane while you're flying it. So, you know, if you've got someone helping you out, whether it's that you have other caregivers coming in and providing hands-on help, whether you've got someone coming in and helping with the driving and the meals and things like that, or whether it's that you've got someone calling in to remind you about stuff that you need to do, right? You're gonna be able to get more done in a day. You're gonna be able to stay more active in your own life. And I do think, you know, yes, realistically, there are only so many hours in a day and a week, right? And you will have caregiving obligations, so realistically, you have less time for your own life when you're actively caregiving. And the nature of caregiving is that someday it ends, right? And when it ends, we want your life to be there for you, to support you, right? And for you to re-engage with at a higher level. So staying active in your own life the most you can is the best way to do that. And it can help lower stress. And then the really, really big one is, what if something happens to you? Right? I went to a friend's wedding, stepped off a curb wrong and broke my foot. Oh well, it happens. But I helped take care of my parents, right? They can do things on their own, but I help them with some stuff, and there's some stuff I can't do right now. My mom asked me to go switch her laundry from the washer to the dryer, and I said, I can't get down the garage steps right now. I'm on crutches right at the time. So there was stuff I couldn't do anymore, and I had to ask people to help me help her, right? So these are things to kind of be thinking about is, I might be okay, but what if I'm not? And how are we gonna fill that in an emergency? So think about who you can trust and rely on, and think about who you can rely on for what. Because it's not all gonna be the same things, right? The care team may change over time. If I'm helping you, you know, I work a full-time job, I help the parents out, I travel a lot for work, right? So I'm probably not the person that anyone is gonna choose to be the one to drive them to doctor's appointments, because you just like never really know where I am. I'm all over. I am probably the person you want to talk to if you've got a doctor's appointment about care planning, right? And you're going to be talking about maybe moving to assisted living, or you're going to be talking about what to do next, because I can give you some support and some input, right? If you're going and you're touring an assisted living, I want to go with you. There might be someone in the family who's not so warm and fuzzy, who you don't necessarily want to turn to for emotional support. But you can turn to them and say like, hey, I've got all these grab bars, I don't know what to do with them. Could you please use your contractor's license to use your knowledge and come out and mount these grab bars, right? Who's the person, maybe, you know, I have a dear friend who's an insurance adjuster. And she's who I would call and say like, I've got this long-term care policy, I don't understand any of the stuff that's in it. Can you sit down and go through it with me? Right, so the people on your care team can be myriad, and they might help you with different things. It's not gonna be one person that you turn to for everything, right? It might be family, it might be friends, it might be neighbors. Maybe you have a neighbor that you can just say like, hey, when you take your trash bins out on Monday night, you take my mom's trash bins out too. That's part of your team, right? That's easy. Can you bring my mom's mail from the mailbox that's all the way down at the end of the road up to her door when you pick up her mail? You can ask someone to do that, right? And then there might be some professionals. So there might be a primary care doctor, might be a neurologist, right? Counselor or therapist, I think, is a great person to have on board for everybody. For you, a caregiver, yes, for sure. But a lot of people in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia actually can still engage in therapy and benefit from counseling. Folks at church, right, your faith-based community. Surely, and I mean, I can see from all the letters and things that are up on the bulletin board here, surely there's people here that you can talk to, and surely there's people here that you've been there for in the past, right, that can now reciprocate. You might look into your local resources. So are there resources here that help with meals? Are there resources here that help with transportation? Is there, you know, you guys have a village, right? A San Mateo County village process here on the coast as well. People in the village might be able to help. Okay, so there's lots of things to look for in your immediate community. And then there's the entire whole giant internet, where there's even more things. So we have a really robust website at the Alzheimer's Association. We have message boards, we have virtual support groups, and there's all sorts of other online communities available to you as well. So think about the kind of help you need and who you need it from, and tell people exactly what it is that you want help with. I need you to do this. Can you be the person that takes my husband out to the range because he loves golf, but he can't get there anymore, right? Can you take him to Top Golf and let him like hit some golf balls? Can you tell him anything about golf? And tell them what you might need in the future, right? So that's another thing that I've said to friends when they say, let me know what I can do. I've said, I don't really need anything right now, but here's the thing I might be helped with later, right? Again, my friend who does insurance, like, someday I'm gonna need you to explain this policy. Don't take it personally if someone says no. You don't want someone to be trying to help you that can't or doesn't really want to. And sometimes people don't have capacity, so it's hard, but try not to take it personally unless there's a reason to take it personally, maybe there's an altercation, but we don't want that, right? So if someone isn't able to help you, understand that and move on, and if someone does help you, say thank you. I know it seems like you've got to, like, that's a simple thing, right? Of course, you're gonna say thank you, but say thank you. People don't do things, I think, to be thanked, but it's nice to be recognized for the support that you get. So a little bit of homework for you all, and there's also a handout at the back for you all, is as you go off today, as you kind of go back into your lives, think about 2 people that you want to be a part of your support team. And think about 2 or 3 or 4 things on that list, right? Of things that you need. What are they? Not necessarily having to put those 2 things together yet, but just who can help and what do I need? Right? And maybe you can kind of start drawing some mental lines there. Another little knowledge check here as we talk about caring for yourself. True or false? Dementia caregivers are less likely to experience anxiety and depression than other caregivers. Oh, that's false. Yeah, that's kind of a mean question. Caregivers of people with dementia have more psychological impact than other types of caregiving. All caregiving is hard, right? All caregiving increases the likelihood that people will have symptoms of anxiety or depression. But it's more likely for folks caring for someone with dementia. There's also a bigger financial impact, right? Dementia is more expensive than other diseases. And that adds to the impact of anxiety and depression and low mood, right? Because finances are a big trigger for both of those things. They're also more likely to have physical problems. So people caring for someone with dementia are more likely to have a physical health problem themselves than other types of caregivers. This is probably connected to the stress level, right? And also some of it is connected to self-neglect. That if we have to decide between making an appointment for ourselves and making an appointment for the person we care for, we're probably gonna make there, right? And so our own health goes by the wayside. So focusing on your own physical health is actually really, really important. We talk about self-care, and a lot of the times people think, I mean, like, you should do yoga, you should take a bath, you should read a book, you should do all those things. And you should go to your physical, you should get your blood work done, you should be having any underlying chronic medical conditions that you have monitored, right? A lot of us, when we are caregiving, are caring for a parent or a spouse, right? Which means that as the person we're caring for ages, we are also aging, and stuff is also happening to us, right? So here's a couple of warning signs I want you guys to be taking an eye on, kind of keeping an eye on. Obviously, anger, anxiety, right, sadness. But also changes in your sleep. So sleeping a lot more or sleeping a lot less, either direction or something I want you to be keeping an eye out for. Irritability, so lack of patience. Caregiving does push on your patience, right? It pushes real hard against your patience. But if your irritability is mounting, right? Think about that. Lack of focus. So if you are constantly making lists, but you can't get anything done on the list. If you're putting things down and you can't find them, if you're struggling with work tasks, right, if you're still working, having a hard time with that. All of that lack of focus is a sign a lot of the time of critical stress, right? And then again, of your overall health problems, just sort of your general well-being. Please pay extra attention if you notice changes in any of this stuff. So if you notice under stress that you're having vision changes, especially blurred vision, you're having stomach pain or stomach irritation, if your blood pressure is newly high or uncontrolled high, changes in appetite in either direction, right? If you're not hungry at all or ravenous, and overeating, either direction, and sleeplessness. All of these can be signs of more complicated physical things going on, right? And we want to make sure that that's taken care of. I think I've harassed you enough about paying attention to your physical symptoms. But it's really important. It's really important. When you're thinking about taking care of yourself, it's important to be realistic about it. It's okay to acknowledge that sometimes this is really hard and that you're losing something. It's also okay that sometimes fun and funny things happen, right? So focus on enjoying the positive things, lead into them when you can, but then we don't need to be pretending like this is the most fun thing we ever did. We can acknowledge that it's, right? Know you're doing your best. Every mistake you make, you're still doing your best. And if you were not caring for this person and this person wasn't getting care somewhere, they would be worse off, right? If no one was helping, it would be worse. We're asking you again about your health, but listen to your own body and take breaks when you need them. We'll talk a little bit more about some resources, but one thing to think about is respite care. It is really fortunate that here on the coast, there is an adult day program. Quite close by in Half Moon Bay, so that might be something to think about, right? In-home care is an option for respite. Asking a neighbor or a friend or a member of the congregation for help can be respite. So look for ways to get those breaks and learn about your community resources, which we're going to talk about together. I like this lady. Her name's Freddie. She's a former family caregiver and she's now a support group facilitator for us. And I like this too.
The advice I would have for others about caregiving is to be kind to yourself, be gentle to yourself, allow yourself to make some errors. Don't judge yourself so hard. Take good care of yourself, eat well, exercise, interact with people outside of the household, do things that are just for you. Go out to eat sometimes. Go out to eat with a friend or maybe alone. But remember that you have to be the best you in order to take care of your loved one. So it is very, very important that you take care of yourself.
I love her. When the next time that you are putting yourself second or third, I want you to envision Freddie looking at you and telling you to go have lunch. Okay. She doesn't care if you're going with a friend or you're going by yourself. And she speaks from experience, right? Because she's been through this and she's now coaching caregivers in her support group, she's saying. At the back of that room, front of the room, whatever, behind you guys, is a resource table with a few things. One of them is this handout on managing caregiver stress. It's got a little checklist with those warning signs that we talked about. And it has some room for you to do a little work to plan ahead. So I really encourage you, if you didn't already grab a copy of that, to grab a copy. And do a little bit of reflecting on that. Also at the back is a flyer for our caregiver respite grant, which I mentioned we do have a grant for folks who live in Santa Clara or San Mateo County who live with the person that they care for and are caring for someone with dementia. There's other resources available for other counties, but that grant back there is for San Mateo and Santa Clara. And if that's you, I encourage you to call our helpline and talk to someone about that grant. This is just a nice, I like this video of these two daughters talking about the benefits of being a caregiver, because as I said when we first got started, right? Many people say that caregiving is stressful, even more say that it's rewarding, and so I think they're able to reflect a little bit on that aspect of it and just send us off with a little bit more of a warm feeling.
My mom loves to love. We're lovers. And so my mom is very much, even now, she will, they're getting in bed at night. This night, I get to this, this one, this, what off and what keeps me pumped and what keeps me going as well. My mom tells me, I don't know what that day or what she's done. She often says to me, thank you for taking. You know, and that means, especially there's sometimes that it's been hard. And at the end of that day, you know, she'll look up and she'll say, and that makes it all worth it. It's like everything else, nothing else matters. It's like, hey, you know what? And that's the best feeling for parents is the fact can't necessarily tell you what's going on. I want to have them to say that. Okay, it makes it all worth it because it lets you know that it was something.
And I just added that sometimes the person's not gonna articulate that as well as their mom does. And might not articulate that the way they're used to them saying it. Right, but if we look for the ways in which it is coming through, it can be really helpful in sustaining us as our caregivers. I want to make sure to leave you with a little bit more information about our resources. And again, there's a resource table at the back. The number one way to reach us and get anything that you need, whether it's to register for a class, to register for a support group, ask a question about something that's going on with your person, is to call our helpline. So it's 800-272-3900. I have some business cards at the back with our helpline number on them. There are also courtesy cards that say on the other side, the person I'm with has dementia, please be patient. So those can be really helpful in like a bank, grocery store, at a restaurant, right? To kind of just subtly tell somebody what's going on. The helpline provides free care consultation. So that means you can call in and say like, I'm having this experience with the person I care for where every night they pack up all their clothes in their suitcase and they try to leave. And you can call the helpline and say you want to talk to somebody about what to do, and someone will talk to you about that. They'll either talk to you right then, or they can schedule a call you back at a better time and talk through that. Right? But again, they can also sign you up for anything that we've got going on. We have local support groups, so there is a support group that meets in Half Moon Bay at Senior Coastsiders and Senior Coastsiders building every month. But we also have lots of online support groups, and there may be other groups in other areas close to you all. Our online resources are there as well. And then our education program. So this was one of our empowered caregiver education programs. We offer them in person like this. We also offer live webinars. So I brought the schedule of our webinars for this quarter in case anyone wants to go through this program again, wants to see one of the other programs, or if you want to share somebody else that you think would benefit. And I also brought you some little brochures about caring for yourself as a caregiver. So all that is there at the back. Again, if you don't mind signing in, and if you would like someone from Senior to follow up with you, if you wouldn't mind just kind of indicating that, put a little star or say, like, call me. So they know, so the team can reach out. And with that, I'll thank you, and thank you guys for having me. Thanks.
And please enjoy our.
Yes, you guys have beautiful refreshments over here.